I was 14 when this happened. I lived with my family in an old house out in a quiet rural area in the United States. The house had been in my family for a long time. My father grew up there, and his parents lived there before him. It always felt old, but not in a bad way. It just felt full of time. Still, there were parts of the house I did not like, and the attic was one of them. The attic was not a place anyone visited often. It was used to store things nobody wanted to deal with. Old furniture, dusty boxes, and random items were all pushed up there and forgotten. The only time anyone went up was around Christmas to bring down decorations. That year, my father told me I was old enough to go get them myself. I did not really listen when he explained what to look for. I nodded like I understood, but my mind was somewhere else. When he finished talking, I climbed the ladder to the attic. I pulled the chain, and the single light turned on. The space looked bigger than I remembered. It was filled with shadows and stacked boxes. I stood there for a moment, trying to remember what I was supposed to grab. I could not remember anything my father had said. I felt a little nervous about going back down to ask again, so I decided to just figure it out myself. I started opening boxes. I moved things around and made a mess without meaning to. Dust filled the air, and the attic felt warm and still. After a while, I found the Christmas decorations. I felt relieved. I carried them down in a few trips and brought them into the living room. When I finished, I went back up one last time. I wanted to make sure I had not missed anything. The attic was more disorganized than before. Boxes were out of place, and things were pushed into new corners. That was when I noticed something I had not seen earlier. In the back corner, partly hidden behind other items, there was a black box. It looked different from everything else. It was not made of weak cardboard. It looked strong, like it was meant to protect what was inside. At the same time, it looked very old. I felt curious. I walked over and picked it up. It was heavier than I expected. I opened it slowly. Inside were papers, a lot of them. There were notebooks, loose pages, and even drawings. Everything was covered in handwriting. The writing was small and crowded, like the person who wrote it had too much to say. I sat down and started reading. At first, the pages seemed normal. They talked about simple things like the weather and daily tasks. It felt like a diary. I thought it belonged to someone who had lived in the house a long time ago. As I kept reading, the writing started to change. It became harder to read. The lines were not as neat. The words felt rushed. The person writing seemed focused on one thing, the attic. The pages were full of measurements. Numbers were written over and over again. The writer kept comparing the size of the attic to the size of the house below. The same numbers appeared again and again, like they were checking something. According to the writing, the attic was too small. There was space missing. The writer believed there was an empty area behind one of the walls. They described it in detail. Every crack, every mark on that wall was written down carefully. I felt uneasy as I read. The entries became more intense. The writer spent more time in the attic. They wrote about staying up there for hours. Sometimes they even slept there. Then the pages changed again. The writer started describing sounds. Scratching, soft breathing. The sounds came from behind the wall. Some pages had times written on them, like late at night. The writer counted how long the sounds lasted. The writing became messy, almost hard to understand. I felt a chill in my body. I kept reading even though I did not want to. The last pages were different. There were no full sentences, just marks, lines drawn over and over again, like counting something. Then it stopped. There was nothing after that. I sat there in the attic, holding those papers. My hands felt cold. The air around me felt heavier than before. I wanted to close the box and leave, but I could not stop thinking about the wall. I looked up slowly. The wall the writer had described was right there. I walked toward it. At first, it looked normal, but when I got closer, I saw small marks, thin cracks, faint lines. They looked like they matched what I had read. My chest felt tight. The attic felt different now. It no longer felt empty. It felt like something was there with me. I felt like I was being watched, not from one place, but from many. I stepped back slowly. My eyes stayed on the wall. I could almost imagine someone standing behind it. I could almost imagine them pressing against it, listening. I picked up the black box and went down the ladder as fast as I could. I found my father and showed him everything. He looked confused and serious at the same time. He said he had never seen the box before. He did not recognize the handwriting. That meant the writer had lived there even before my grandfather. We went back up to the attic together. I stayed close to him as he looked at the wall. He compared the marks to the pages. After a while, he stopped moving. He stood still, thinking. Then he said he was going to open the wall. I felt nervous, but I did not stop him. He brought tools and started pulling the wall apart. The sound of wood breaking filled the attic. Dust fell into the air. Then the wall opened. There was space behind it. A large empty space that stretched along the wall. I felt my stomach drop. The inside of that hidden space was covered in marks, dark lines, strange shapes, symbols I did not understand. They covered almost every surface. It did not look like writing. It looked like something else, something I could not explain. I felt frozen. There was no door, no opening. No way anyone could have gotten inside that space. But the marks were there. That meant someone had been inside. We checked everything carefully. There was nothing else in that space, just the markings. It did not make sense. I stood there, staring at it, trying to understand. My mind could not find an answer. Later, my father said something that stayed with me. He said the person who wrote those pages did not seem like someone who would organize everything neatly and hide it away. That meant someone else had found those writings and stored them. He believed it was my grandfather. That idea made everything feel even worse. We never found out the truth. We left that house years later. But sometimes, I still think about that attic. I think about the wall, and I think about the space behind it. I still cannot understand how someone could write about something they should not have been able to see. And sometimes, when I remember those markings, I feel the same thing I felt that day, like something is watching me from a place I cannot see. When I was a kid, the attic always scared me more than the basement did. I don't really know why. Most people are more afraid of basements, but there was something about our attic that really got to me. If I had to guess, I'd say it was because our attic was slightly unconventional compared to what you're probably picturing. For starters, it was surprisingly spacious. Most attics are typically cramped and congested, which makes sense. But our attic was built in such a way that you didn't ever have to crouch when you were up there. You might think that would imply we used it more often, the same way anyone would use excess space. But no, I'm not really sure why. But my parents treated it like a glorified storage room. That was its sole purpose. Thinking about it now, they honestly avoided it as much as possible. The other thing about it was that it had so many nooks and crannies built into it. What I mean by that is the space was broken up by odd beams and small changes in elevation, almost like a makeshift maze. The beams were of uneven thickness, and there was no pattern to where they appeared. The result was that you couldn't stand in any one place out there and have a clear line of sight from one end to the other. And the uneven flooring was a nightmare. You could genuinely injure yourself up there if you weren't careful. My dad used to joke that one day one of us would slip on one of the joists, fall through the insulation, and puncture a hole in the ceiling. So you can imagine why an attic like that would be scary to a little kid. The maze-like quality was what freaked me out the most. I really didn't like not being able to see the attic in its entirety, and every time I went up there, I felt like someone was hiding behind one of the beams. But anyway, what I'm about to tell you happened so long ago that I don't have a ton of other memories from that period in my life. For whatever reason, however, this memory is so vivid that it feels like a thorn protruding into what was otherwise a fantastic childhood. It happened during the week, which I remember because I had school that day. I'm not sure exactly how old I was, but I was in middle school. I woke up one morning and noticed my feet were dirty. The bottoms were gray and grimy, and there was this fine layer of grit between my toes that I couldn't explain. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed staring at them, trying to figure out what had happened. I hadn't gone outside the night before. I hadn't done anything unusual. I'd just gone to bed, fallen asleep, and woken up with filthy feet. Being a little kid and all, I didn't give it too much thought beyond that. I just washed my feet in the bathtub and went about my day. Things only escalated from there, though. A few days later, I found a box in my room that didn't belong there. It was the small cardboard box filled with old photographs, the kind my parents kept stored away in the attic. I had no memory of bringing it downstairs. And when I asked my mom about it, She just assumed I'd been rummaging through the attic for some reason. I told her I hadn't, but she didn't seem concerned. She just took the box back upstairs, and that was that. Then it happened again. I woke up one morning and found an old lamp sitting on my desk. This ugly brass thing that I vaguely recognized from the attic. This time I was sure I definitely hadn't brought that down. I would have remembered carrying a lamp through my house in the middle of the night, but there it was, sitting on my desk like it belonged there. That's when things started clicking into place. The dirty feet, the box of photographs, the lamp. I wasn't just sleepwalking. I was sleepwalking to the attic. The realization didn't scare me right away, but it made me feel strange. The idea that I was unconsciously navigating that maze of beams and uneven flooring in the dark, completely unaware of what I was doing, was weird. I told my parents, and they reacted exactly how you'd expect. They said sleepwalking was completely normal, that lots of kids did it, and that I'd probably grow out of it. I wouldn't exactly say they were dismissive, but they weren't overly concerned either. To them, it was just one of those things. But to me, it was more than that. After the next incident, I started dreading bedtime. I'd lie in bed for hours after I was supposed to go to sleep, fighting it because I was terrified of what might happen once I was unconscious. I obviously couldn't fight sleep forever, though, and every morning I would frantically check my feet to see if they were dirty. If they were clean, it had been a good night. If they were dirty, it had been a bad night. They were usually clean, but those few times they weren't really got to me. There was no denying that I was definitely going up to the attic regularly. And the worst part about the whole thing was that I had no memory of it whatsoever. For all I knew, I was spending more time up there than in my own bed. The fear I felt during that period was different from anything I had ever experienced. It was like the slow, creeping dread that never went away. It was awful. But nothing was scarier than what I'm about to say. I woke up one morning, only it wasn't morning. It was still dark out. It took me a few seconds to realize it, but I wasn't in my bed either. In fact, I wasn't even lying down. I was standing. That was the first thing I registered. I was standing upright in complete darkness, and I had no idea where I was. For a few seconds, my brain couldn't even process it. But then the recognition hit me. I was in the attic. The fear that washed over me was so intense that I almost couldn't breathe. I was in the attic in the middle of the night in pitch-black darkness. I couldn't see a single thing. Not the beams, not the boxes, not the hatch, nothing. Just absolute impenetrable black. And to make matters worse, I had no idea where in the attic I was. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, too scared to move. It was like sleep paralysis times 100. I knew the layout of the attic, but only vaguely and only from memory. I also knew there were obstacles everywhere. The idea of trying to find my way back to the hatch in complete darkness was almost unthinkable, but I couldn't just stand there forever. So I started moving slowly and painfully. I was so scared that I actually started crying, but silently. The tears were just flooding down my face, and I felt like if I made too much noise, something was going to get me. It was the most terrified I've ever been, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone out there. I don't know what was giving me that thought, but I could feel something else there with me, something further in the dark. And as soon as I had that thought, I actually heard something. There was a soft thud from somewhere behind me. It honestly sounded like a footstep or someone shifting their weight on the floorboards. I kept moving, but I heard the sound twice more, and both times it sounded like it was coming from a different spot. At that point, I was convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt that there was something else up there with me. I don't know how long it took me to find the hatch, but I eventually did find it. I went straight to my parents' room and woke them up. I was full on bawling at that point. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I told him what had happened, how I'd had to find my way back in the dark. I told him about the sounds too, and that there was someone in the attic. I expected my dad to spring out of bed and rush up there with a baseball bat, but he didn't. They didn't even really take me seriously. My mom just hugged me and told me it was okay, that sleepwalking could be scary, but it wasn't dangerous. My dad offered to put a lock on the attic hatch if it would make me feel better, and I said yes, obviously. But I knew what I heard. I insisted that they at least check the attic, and my dad finally agreed. As I was watching my dad climb up there was a part of me that genuinely thought he wasn't going to make it back. But not 2 minutes later, he was already climbing back down the ladder. He told me there was nothing up there and to go back to sleep. So that's what I did. But lying in bed after that experience was the worst night of my life. After that, the sleepwalking did stop. I'm not sure what I would have done if it had continued. And speaking of that, I've never been able to fully accept the sleepwalking explanation. I know that's the most logical explanation. Sleepwalking is a real thing that happens to people and there's nothing supernatural about it. But there's this part of me that can't let it go. The way I always ended up in the same place, the attic, never anywhere else in the house, and the way I was apparently capable of navigating the maze of beams and obstacles in complete darkness without even hurting myself. And most of all, that night, I woke up standing in the dark. The sounds I heard, I still believe there was something up there with me. I really do. What it was, I have no idea. I'm obviously a lot older now, and I've brought these concerns up to my parents several times, but they always give me the same dismissive answers. It almost feels like they themselves don't want to think about it, which also doesn't make much sense to me. I doubt I'll ever get the answer I'm looking for. I have been smoking for most of my life. It started when I was young, and now it feels like something I cannot separate from my routine. I do not even think about it much anymore. It is just something I do at the end of the day, something that gives me a reason to step outside and breathe in the quiet. I never smoke inside the house. I made that rule years ago, and I have never broken it. I live alone now in an old house out in the countryside. It is a large house, bigger than I need. My parents lived here before me, and when they moved away, they left it to me. At first, I felt lucky. It was peaceful and quiet, far away from people and noise. But after some time, the space started to feel different. It felt too open, too empty, like the house was holding more silence than it should. Behind the house, there is a large backyard. It stretches out into a line of trees that block the view of anything beyond them. At night, it becomes very dark. The only light comes from the house itself. I walk out there every night when I smoke. I follow the same path along the edge of the yard. It takes me about 10 minutes. It has become a habit, something I rely on to clear my mind. The house is very old. The floors creak when I walk. The walls make soft sounds at night, like they are settling or breathing. There is an attic above the second floor. It is accessed by a pull-down ladder in the hallway. I do not go up there often. It is just a storage space filled with things I do not use. There is a small window in the attic. It faces the backyard. I have seen it many times during my walks, but I never paid attention to it. It was just another part of the house, until one night. I was halfway through my usual walk, holding a cigarette between my fingers, when I looked up at the house. I do not know why I looked. It just happened. My eyes moved toward the attic window without thinking. For a moment, I thought I saw something move behind the glass. It was quick, just a shape passing across the darkness. I stopped walking. I stood there and stared at the window. It was completely dark again. Nothing moved. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe a shadow, maybe something outside reflecting on the glass. I finished my cigarette and went back inside. The next night I went out again. I followed the same path, the same steps, the same slow pace. And again I looked up. This time I saw it more clearly. Something shifted behind the window. It was not fast like before. It was slow, deliberate. I felt a cold weight settle in my chest. I stayed there longer than I should have, staring up at that small window. I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. I thought about animals, something getting into the attic. That made the most sense, but something about the movement did not feel like an animal. I went back inside. I stood at the bottom of the stairs and looked up toward the hallway. The house was quiet, too quiet. I listened carefully, hoping to hear scratching or movement. There was nothing. I did not want to go up there, but I knew I had to. I turned on my phone light and pulled down the ladder. The wood creaked loudly as it unfolded. The sound echoed through the house. I hesitated for a moment, then started climbing. The attic was dark above me. I could not see inside until my head reached the opening. When I finally looked in, I froze. The attic was destroyed. Boxes were overturned. Furniture was pushed aside. Everything looked like it had been thrown around in a violent way. But that was not what held my attention. The walls were covered in something black. It looked like paint at first, but it was too thick, too uneven. It was smeared across the walls and ceiling, dripping down in slow lines. It looked wet, like it had just been put there. My stomach tightened. I felt like I could not breathe. I did not stay up there long. I looked around quickly, shining my light in every corner. I did not see anyone. There was nowhere to hide. The attic was one open space. I climbed down as fast as I could. My fear turned into something else, a sharp, restless anger. I started searching the house. I moved from room to room, checking every corner, every closet. I expected to find someone. I found nothing. The house felt empty again, but it did not feel safe. I went upstairs to my bedroom. I stood there, trying to calm down, trying to think clearly. Then I heard it. 2 heavy thumps, then a dragging sound. It came from directly above me. The attic. I felt my body tense. My mind raced. I had already checked. There was no one there. But the sound was real. I went downstairs and grabbed a large kitchen knife. My hands were shaking, but I held it tightly. I could not ignore it. I could not pretend it was nothing. I went back upstairs. I pulled down the ladder again. The sound had stopped. I climbed slowly this time, each step louder than it should have been. My breathing felt too fast, too loud in my ears. When I reached the top, I pushed myself into the attic and started moving forward. I did not think. I just moved. I walked through the space, looking everywhere. There was no one there. But something had changed. The black smears were still on the walls, but now there were deep scratches across the wood. Long marks cut into the beams and floor. They looked fresh. I stared at them, trying to understand. My grip on the knife loosened. The fear came back stronger than before. I backed away slowly. Then I turned and climbed down as fast as I could. I locked myself in the bathroom and called for help. My voice did not sound like my own. It sounded distant, like it was coming from somewhere else. When the officers arrived, they searched the attic. They found nothing. They told me no one was there. No sign of entry. No way anyone could have gotten in or out without being seen. They left after a while. The house became quiet again. That was weeks ago. Nothing has happened since. But I have not gone back up there. I still go outside at night. I still follow the same path. But now, every time I walk, I feel it. I feel it before I even look. And when I finally do, my eyes always drift up to that small attic window. Sometimes it is still. Sometimes it is empty. But sometimes, just for a second, I see something move behind the glass. And I always wonder the same thing, if it is still up there, or if it has already found its way down.